The Mirrors of the Valley of Mist. Written and narrated by Gregory Sparrow. Welcome to Whispers of Shadow. If you ever find yourself in a village where every mirror is covered, do not uncover them. If you notice that the people there avoid windows, puddles, and polished metal surfaces, do not ask why. And if one morning you see your own reflection standing somewhere you are not, run, because that is exactly how the story of the Valley of Mist began. The village does not appear on most maps. Many people believe it never existed at all. Others claim it was abandoned decades ago. The truth is far stranger. The Valley of Mist was real, and according to the few surviving records, something still remains there, waiting. My name is Marek Nowak. At least, that is the name written on the reports. The recordings, the statements, the documents collected after the disappearance of nearly an entire village. This story begins during the autumn of 1992, the year the fog came back, the year it stayed. The Valley of Mist sat between steep forested hills far from any major road. To reach it, travelers had to follow an old mountain route that most maps no longer showed. The villagers liked it that way. They avoided outsiders, not because they were hostile, because they were afraid. Afraid that someone would eventually uncover the truth. When I first arrived there, I thought the stories were ridiculous. I was a journalist, a researcher. I spent years investigating local legends and supposed paranormal events. Most turned out to be misunderstandings, exaggerations, fear mixed with isolation. The valley seemed no different. Until I saw the mirrors, every house had them covered. Not some, all of them. Large mirrors, small mirrors, bathroom mirrors, hand mirrors. Anything capable of reflecting a human face. Every reflective surface was hidden beneath cloth. The first person I asked refused to answer. The second crossed herself and walked away. The third simply said, "We do not look into glass when the fog comes." Nothing more. That night I stayed in the village guest house. The owner was an old man named Tomasz. Before leaving me alone, he gave a warning. If you hear knocking after midnight, don't answer. I laughed. He didn't. Then he added something even stranger. If you see yourself outside the window, his voice trembled, keep the curtains closed. Then he left. At midnight, the fog arrived. Not gradually, not naturally. One moment, the valley was visible. The next, it vanished beneath a white wall. I had never seen anything like it. The fog moved too fast, too deliberately, like a living thing spreading through the streets. I watched it from my room. The village disappeared. The church disappeared. Even the nearest houses vanished. Only white remained. Then I heard something. 3 knocks, slow, heavy, coming from downstairs. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The old man's warning returned immediately. Another 3 knocks. Then silence. I told myself it was wind. Old wood. Anything but what I was actually thinking. Several minutes passed. Then I noticed movement. Outside the window. Someone was standing in the fog, a human silhouette, perfectly still, watching the guest house. My stomach tightened. The figure looked familiar, too familiar. I stepped closer. The fog shifted. For a brief second, moonlight touched the face, and I realized why it looked familiar. It was me. The same height, the same coat, the same face. Standing motionless in the mist, looking directly at my window. I stumbled backward. When I looked again, it was gone. The next morning I told no one. I convinced myself I had imagined it. Fatigue, stress, a trick of the light. But deep down, I knew what I had seen. And things only became worse. The village priest agreed to speak with me on the 2nd day. His church stood near the center of the valley, an old stone structure older than any building around it. Inside, every mirror had been removed. Even polished metal decorations had been painted black. The priest seemed exhausted, like someone carrying a burden far too heavy. When I asked him about the mirrors, he remained silent for a long time. Then he finally answered, "They don't begin in the mirrors." I frowned. What doesn't? The reflections. A chill crawled through me. The priest continued, "People think mirrors create them. They don't. They only reveal them." I asked what he meant. He refused to explain further. Instead, he led me beneath the church, down a narrow stone staircase, into a hidden cellar. There, beneath decades of dust, stood a wooden chest secured with rusted iron. Inside were journals, reports, letters, records stretching back more than a century, and all of them described the same thing: the fog, the reflections, the disappearances. One journal belonged to a school teacher from 1847. The entries began normally. Descriptions of village life, weather, students, harvests. Then everything changed. One entry read, "I saw my reflection standing in the room after the mirror fell." Another, "It smiled before I did." Another, "I am no longer certain which of us is real." The handwriting became worse with every page. By the end, it was barely legible. The final sentence was written in a frantic scrawl. "If you can see the difference between yourself and your reflection, it is already too late." I remember reading that line several times. Something about it felt wrong, not frightening. Wrong, like discovering a rule that should not exist. That night I returned to the guest house, and that was when everything truly began. The fog was thicker than before. It did not drift. It did not move. It stood perfectly still, like a wall surrounding the village. The silence was worse. No birds, no insects, no wind, nothing. The world felt frozen, as if time itself had stopped breathing. When I entered my room, I immediately noticed something strange. The covered mirror, the one hidden behind the wardrobe. The cloth lay on the floor. I was absolutely certain I had not touched it. Slowly I approached. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But curiosity won. I looked into the glass. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then my reflection smiled. I didn't, and in that instant I understood. The villagers had never feared mirrors. They feared what was looking through them. The smile lasted only a second. Then the reflection returned to normal. Same face, same expression, same frightened eyes, but I had already seen it. I stepped away from the mirror, and for the first time since arriving in the valley, I understood the villagers. I understood the covered glass, the scratched windows, the blackened metal, the fear in their voices. They were not protecting themselves from superstition. They were protecting themselves from being noticed. I threw the cloth back over the mirror and packed my equipment in silence. I planned to leave before sunrise, but the valley had other plans. At 2:17 a.m., every bell in the church began to ring. Not one, all of them. The sound tore through the fog like a warning. I ran to the window but stopped before touching the curtain. Outside, the entire village was awake. People stood in doorways, in the street, beside wells. In front of windows they refused to open. No one spoke. No one moved. They were all looking toward the church. Then I saw why. The fog around the church was bending inward, as if something inside the mist was pulling it down. The church doors were open, and in the doorway stood a man. At first, I thought it was the priest. Then the figure stepped forward. It had his body, his clothes, his posture, but not his face. The face was wrong, smooth in places where it should have wrinkles, still in places where it should have expression, like a person remembered incorrectly, an almost human copy. Someone screamed. The figure turned its head, not toward the scream, toward me. Even from that distance, through fog and glass, I felt it look directly into my room. I backed away. Behind me, Something knocked softly from inside the covered mirror. Once, twice, 3 times. I did not uncover it. I did not breathe. The knocking stopped. Then a voice whispered from behind the cloth. My voice. Let me see. I grabbed my bag and ran. The guest house hallway was dark. The lights had gone out. My flashlight flickered as I moved down the stairs. On the ground floor, every framed photograph on the wall had been turned face down. Every piece of glass had been covered. Every reflective surface hidden, except one. A small, cracked picture frame lay on the floor. Its glass reflected the staircase behind me. In that reflection, I saw someone standing at the top. Me. Smiling. I didn't look back. I ran into the street. The fog swallowed me immediately. The village had changed. Houses seemed farther apart. Streets I had walked during the day now led in different directions. Doors stood open. Curtains moved without wind. Somewhere nearby, a child was crying, or imitating crying. I couldn't tell. I found Tomasz near the well, the old guest house owner. He stood barefoot in the mud, staring into the water. I called his name. He did not answer. I reached for his shoulder. Before I touched him, he spoke. Do not look down. I froze. The well water was black, perfectly still, reflective. Something was moving in it, not below the surface. Inside the reflection, a face was rising toward us. Tomasz began to weep. It learned me first, he whispered. Then his reflection in the water opened its mouth. Tomasz did not. The old man vanished before my eyes. No blood, no scream. No body falling into the well. One moment, he stood beside me. The next, he was simply gone. But his reflection remained in the water. Looking up, smiling. I ran again. By then, the village was collapsing into chaos, not loud chaos. Silent chaos. Doors opened by themselves. Figures moved between houses. People disappeared in the mist. And wherever they vanished, something else appeared. A copy, not perfect, not yet. Some stood too straight. Some smiled too widely. Some moved as if they had only recently learned how bodies worked. The priest found me near the chapel square. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. They are not replacing us anymore, he said. They are collecting us. I asked what he meant. He pointed toward the fog, and for a moment it parted. Behind the chapel, beyond the cemetery wall, stood something that should not have been possible. A mass of human shapes. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all pressed together, faces overlapping, eyes opening and closing in different places, mouths smiling out of sequence. It was not a creature. It was not a crowd. It was every reflection that had ever escaped. Every stolen face, every copy, all of them joined into one impossible thing. The priest made the sign of the cross. His hand trembled. It has been building itself for generations. The thing in the fog shifted, and all of its faces turned toward us. At the center of that impossible mass, I saw the school teacher from the journal, or what remained of him. Then Tomasz, then the priest's face, then mine. Not my reflection from the mirror. Another one. Older, closer, waiting. The priest grabbed my arm. Run before it learns the rest of you. I asked him what would happen to the villagers. He looked toward the square. Most of them were already standing motionless in the fog. Their reflections had gathered around them, face to face, like people meeting themselves for the first time. Then the priest said the last thing I ever heard from him. There are no villagers left. A sound passed through the valley. Not a scream, not thunder. A low, deep vibration, like glass humming under pressure. Every covered mirror in every house began to shake. Windows cracked, puddles rippled, metal tools trembled in sheds. And all across the village, the reflections began to move without bodies. I ran toward the road. At least I thought I did. But the fog kept shifting. The path bent back on itself. The same houses appeared again and again. The same dead tree. The same broken fence. The same chapel bell ringing from nowhere. Then I reached my car. For one beautiful second, I thought I had escaped. The windows were covered in condensation. I opened the door, threw my bag inside, started the engine. The headlights cut into the fog, and there, standing directly in front of the car, was myself. Not smiling now, just waiting. It raised one hand. I raised mine before I realized I was doing it. The reflection tilted its head. So did I. That was when I understood the worst part. It was not only copying me, I was beginning to copy it. I slammed my foot onto the accelerator. The car shot forward. The figure vanished into the fog. I do not know if I hit it. I do not know if it was ever really there. The road twisted through the trees. Branches scraped the windows. The fog pressed against the windshield until the headlights became useless. I drove blind. Then the glass in the rearview mirror cracked. A thin line spread across it. Then another. I tried not to look, but the human mind is weak. It turns toward fear, even when it knows better. In the broken rearview mirror, I saw the village behind me. Not as it was, as it truly was, every house filled with faces, every window crowded with reflections, hundreds of eyes watching me leave, and in the middle of the road behind the car, my reflection was running after me, not fast, not desperate, calm, patient, as if it knew roads end, as if it knew people get tired, as if it knew I would eventually have to look again. We're approaching the finale. I reached the main road at dawn. The fog ended suddenly. One moment I was inside it. The next I burst into sunlight. The valley disappeared behind me, not gradually, not in the distance. It simply vanished. There was only forest, no road behind me, no chapel, no village, no fog. I stopped the car on the shoulder and sat there, shaking, until a passing truck driver found me. The official report states that I was dehydrated, confused, and suffering from exposure. It says I invented the story. It says the Valley of Mist was probably a name used by locals for an abandoned settlement that no longer exists. It says no evidence was found. That is not true. There was evidence. My camera, my tapes, my notebooks, the journal from 1847. All of it was taken. I never saw most of it again, but one tape was returned to me by mistake. For years, I refused to watch it. I kept it sealed in a box. Then, 15 years later, after the dream started, I finally played it. The footage showed my room in the guest house, the uncovered mirror, me standing in front of it, my reflection smiling. But that was not the worst part. The worst part came after I ran from the room. The camera kept recording. For several minutes, the mirror reflected an empty room. Then my reflection stepped out of the glass. It stood in the room, alone, listening. Then it turned toward the camera and whispered, "He still thinks he escaped." The words echoed in my head for years. He still thinks he escaped. I replayed the footage dozens of times, every time hoping I had misunderstood, every time hoping the voice belonged to someone else. It never did. The face was mine. The voice was mine. The smile was mine. Yet I knew with absolute certainty that it wasn't me. After watching the tape, I stopped sleeping. Every reflection became a threat. Store windows, television screens, car mirrors, phone displays, anything capable of showing my face. At first, the changes were subtle. A blink that happened too late. A smile that lingered too long. A movement that seemed slightly delayed. Small things. Easy to dismiss. Easy to explain away. But they became more frequent. One evening I stood in my apartment bathroom brushing my teeth. I glanced at the mirror. My reflection was staring directly at me, perfectly still. I lowered my toothbrush. The reflection remained frozen for almost 2 seconds before finally copying the movement. 2 seconds. That was all. But it was enough. I smashed the mirror that night. The next morning, I covered every reflective surface in my apartment. I moved twice, changed cities 3 times, changed jobs, changed routines. Nothing helped. Because the problem was never the mirrors. The priest had been right. Mirrors were only doors. The real thing lived somewhere else. And it had learned my face. Years passed. Then decades. The valley of mist slowly disappeared from memory. People stopped talking about it. Researchers lost interest. Files vanished. Witnesses died. The few surviving villagers refused interviews. Most never spoke publicly again. Officially, the village became a myth, an internet story, a local legend, a ghost tale told around campfires. Unofficially, the nightmares never stopped. In every dream, I found myself back in the valley, standing in the fog, walking through empty streets, hearing church bells in the distance. And every time I dreamed, I saw the same thing, someone walking beside me, never in front, never behind, always just beyond the edge of vision, keeping pace, waiting. Years later, I began receiving letters. No return address, no fingerprints, no identifying marks. Each contained only a single photograph. The first showed a highway gas station. Nothing unusual. Until I noticed the reflection in a vending machine. I was standing there, looking at the camera. The problem was that I had never been to that gas station. The second photograph arrived 3 months later. A shopping mall. Crowded. Busy. Dozens of people. Yet among them stood my reflection, watching the photographer. The third photograph came a year later. A family birthday party. Children smiling. Cake on the table. And in the dark television screen behind them, my face. Waiting. Watching. Smiling. I burned every photograph. More arrived. I stopped opening them. They still came. Sometimes I found them beneath my door. Sometimes in my mailbox. Once inside my own bedroom. I never learned who sent them. Maybe no one did. The final photograph arrived 6 months before my death. It showed my apartment building, taken from across the street. I was standing at the window, looking outside. Behind me stood another figure, my reflection, only a few inches away, close enough to touch me. I moved out that same day. It changed nothing, because by then I had begun noticing something far worse. Memories, missing memories, entire conversations I couldn't remember having, receipts for purchases I didn't recall making, handwritten notes in my apartment, written in my handwriting, using phrases I would never use. At least I didn't think I would. One morning, I woke up with mud on my shoes. Another time, I found scratches on my hands. Then there were the recordings. I started filming myself while I slept. At first, the footage showed nothing. Then, one night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., I sat upright in bed. My eyes remained closed. I climbed out of bed, walked to the covered mirror, stood in front of it, and whispered, "Not yet." Then I returned to bed. I had no memory of doing it. The next night, it happened again. Different words, same voice, same sleeping body, same covered mirror. Weeks later, I stopped reviewing the recordings. I was afraid of what I might see, afraid of discovering that I wasn't always the one controlling my own movements. Then came the final journal, the notebook you are reading now. I began writing because I no longer trusted my memory. I needed proof, evidence, something permanent, something that could survive if I couldn't. At first, the entries were normal. Dates, observations, descriptions of dreams. Then the handwriting started changing. Subtle differences, nothing dramatic. A slightly different angle, different pressure, different spacing. At least 3 separate handwriting experts later confirmed what I already suspected. Some entries appeared to be written by a different person, despite using my exact handwriting. I know how impossible that sounds. I don't care. I stopped caring years ago, because impossible things exist. I saw them in the valley. I watched them emerge from the fog. And now I see them every day, sometimes in reflections, sometimes in dreams, sometimes standing at the edge of crowded streets, watching, waiting, learning. The finale begins. 3 nights ago I saw him again, closer than ever before. Not in a mirror, not in glass, not in water, standing in my living room, exactly where the school teacher described seeing his reflection in 1847. No mirror, no window, no reflective surface. Just a man wearing my face, looking directly at me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then he smiled, the same smile from the guest house, the same smile from the tape, the same smile from every photograph. And for the first time in 30 years, I smiled back. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop myself. He nodded, turned around, and walked into the darkness of the hallway. Gone. Just like that. Since then, I have felt something changing. Small things. forgotten names, lost hours, memories that no longer feel like mine. Sometimes I catch myself wondering whether I ever truly left the valley, whether the road was real, whether the truck driver existed, whether any of it happened the way I remember. Because the closer he gets, the less certain I become. I found something yesterday, an old photograph, one I had never seen before. It showed the villagers gathered in front of the chapel sometime around 1910. Dozens of faces, men, women, children. I studied the image for nearly an hour. Then I noticed something impossible. Standing among them was me. Not someone similar, not a distant resemblance. Me. My face. My eyes. My features. In a photograph taken more than 80 years before I was born. I finally understand now. The reflections do not merely copy people, they keep them. They remember them. And once remembered, they never let go. If you are reading this, there is something you need to know, something every witness missed, something hidden in every account from the Valley of Mist. Nobody ever describes the moment the reflection first appears. Nobody. Not the teacher, not the priest, not Tomasz, not me, because by the time we notice it, it is already there, watching, learning, waiting, long before we become aware of it. That means only one thing. The reflection was never created. It arrived first, and the person who sees it may be the copy, not the original. I hear footsteps outside my apartment now. Slow, measured, patient. The same footsteps I heard in the fog all those years ago. They're getting closer. I think he finally found me. Or maybe I finally found him. There is only one sentence left to write. One final truth. The worst part is that I am no longer certain which one of us has been writing this journal. The end. Hidden detail. Throughout the entire story, nobody ever witnesses a reflection being created. Every account begins after the reflection already exists. This suggests that the reflections may have been present long before the people they imitate were ever born.